Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show. Here's your host, Paul Winkler.
And welcome to the Investor Coaching Show. Paul Winkler talking money and investing and walking through the news of the week. Now it's going to be, Ann actually did all the walking. Ann Sawaski did all the walking through the news for me. And he came up with some really good things. I love.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting.
I think this is going to be really, really good. So let's jump in. You pick. You tell me what you want to talk about first. There's a whole range of things, and most of them I read already, but a couple of them that I didn't quite get into.
Well, I don't know. Should we talk about the elephant in the room, which is Amazon being sued by the FTC in 17 states for anti-competitive and monopolistic practices?
I think we can. I am a fan of the services that they provide. I do like that, but I have seen things over time where you go, you hear things like anti-competitive practices in that you come up with a product that really, really doesn't sell, and you're just fine. You don't have to worry. Yeah. You don't have to worry about putting your product out there and worry about any competition. But if you have a product that's like really, really good and hot and everybody wants to buy it, then all of a sudden you're competing with them, from what I understood. Is that part of it?
Well, that's part of it. It's that they are taking monopolistic control over competition. They control 40% of the market.
That's unreal.
That's a lot.
And you go out there to other places that actually ship things.
Yeah.
And I have actually made the decision in some cases to buy something from somebody else just to put the business someplace else.
I do that. Honestly, I try not to use Amazon just because of that reason. I don't know. I always like to support the little guy.
I'm all about convenience to a certain extent. But yeah, that's interesting. And from an investing perspective, I think that we probably ought to talk about what does that have to do with investing.
Well, yeah. I see here. I think there's this multifaceted. So part of it is that they are trying to stop them. They're issuing a permanent injunction to prohibit Amazon from engaging in these unlawful conduct and loosen its monopolistic control. And they allege they're doing anti-competitive practices in a number of fashions. One is that they are, when you do a search on Amazon, they control what comes up. So let's say they have a similar product that they're selling directly, that will come up before the other one of the third-party vendor.
Yeah, it's like a preferred or something like that. Amazon preferred, or I can't. It's something like it's a word like that. I can't remember.
Yeah, so they're basically. That's a pretty good argument for anti-competitive practice right there, is that you're prohibiting people from seeing your competitor's product, because the reality is people aren't going to keep searching page after page after page to get down to, some other competitor's product. I mean, that's not how people work on the internet.
For me, here's what I think is really salient about this and very interesting. So with investing markets when Trump was president, you saw a dominance of large companies. Now, you think of Trump as being a guy that's going to be a reformer, as a lot of people, paint him that way. He's going to be a reformer. He's going to come in. He's not going to, not going to mess around. He's going to come in and take down some of the powers that be is kind of how it was painted. And really, I thought, there are a lot of things that he's doing. And I remain agnostic, in all of this stuff as much as I possibly can here. And I can argue both sides of a fence on something, like nobody's business, just because I get both sides of the argument. But here's what I saw as an investment guy during that period of time. And this is what can change in a heartbeat, is that large U.S. growth companies actually dominated. Now, these are companies that for all intents and purposes, when he was president, he was probably should have been really concerned about, because they were doing things that, in putting out information and being the broadcast medium for a lot of information that was very anti-him. Yeah,
Well, yes.
You know what I mean? So what is interesting to me is those companies actually prospered during that period of time and did very well, and they got bigger. And then, of course, you have tariffs in other countries around the world, and those tariffs didn't just affect China, but they also affected some of our allies as well. So it made it hard for some of the smaller companies in other countries as well as in the U.S. to compete. So hence what happens is when you have something like this that takes place, I look at it as, wow, this could really give a leg up or really help out smaller companies or companies that have been out of favor for a while, which is by definition what we call value companies. Now, here's what's interesting about that is that, and this is the hard thing, is that as an investor, we sit there and go, gosh, we want to be diversified here, diversified there. Why do we want all this diversification? Why do we want to be in all these different markets? Because news like this can come around the bend at any time, and it could change the whole playing field.
Yeah, because actually one of the articles about this, I just literally just saw this come in, and one of the headings was can I say it? Existential threat to Amazon. Which it could be, because they say right here, many wondered whether the agency would seek a forced breakup of the retail giant.
Can you say baby bells?
Yes, that was exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
So and that is what they do with monopolies. Monopolies are viewed to be anti-competitive. They can control pricing. They can drive out competitors. And the interesting thing is Amazon, and by the way, this isn't only Amazon, it's tech. This was focused on other tech giants as well.
Well, let me just say something really quick, because some people out there may not even know what I'm talking about, baby bells. Or, they're like, what on earth, because you're not old like, like me. But, the idea was that you had Bell Telephone, that was it. It was kind of like you didn't have any competition. So it broke up, and it's interesting what happened. The story behind the Bell Telephone, when that breakup occurred, it really, after a while, it was this great breakup, and you had business spread all over the place, and it was a forced breakup, but they actually started to come back together as time went on.
They did, yes.
Which is kind of like...
It's weird.
It is kind of weird, and to quote Chris Hand. It's weird, isn't it?
It is. That really shouldn't happen.
But it is what happened.
Right.
So, in essence, that's what we're talking about. It was a breaking up of that, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so this has implications on small businesses, to your point, because they were saying one of the arguments in here is that they are charging exorbitant fees, so up to 45% of revenue for third parties that are using their site. That's a lot of money that a third-party vendor on Amazon is having to give them to get their product out there.
Well, I've often heard that their biggest profit center is just plain advertising. And it's not necessarily the sale of products, where you typically have a retailer buy something, they mark it up, they sell it to the public.
But
that would be advertising.
But Amazon, too, has so many other legs to it. I mean, they have a data component, and Google is the same way. So they sell big companies engineering and data management too. So they have their fingers in businesses not only in the US but all over the world, and controlling the tech for them. So I mean, I think that, and then even they just said things just like food. People order groceries and everything these days.
Having a legal background like you do, I can only imagine how much time it would take to litigate something like this.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be like years and years in courts, right?
It could be, but you know what? With something like this, my guess is it it's not going to go to court, is they'll settle somehow. And
I think that's a good point. And probably what'll happen is they may start to straighten out some of the practices so as not to be a target.
Yeah. They might, or they might. I mean, I hate to be negative about it, but a lot of these states, when they get on board this, they just want a big payoff to go into the coffer of the state, and then they'll go, wait, I'm sorry.
Say that's not so. No, that can't be.
But, 17 states are getting on board, and that's usually what happens. They don't usually end up doing anything but getting a payoff. It's like the tobacco thing and so on. So I don't know.
Some of the foreign governments have actually been fairly effective at dealing with it. I mean, that little country I talked about a few weeks ago that ended up getting the USB-C into the Apple iPhone.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe it'll be a foreign government that pushes it more than our own government. But I think that the point is you just don't know. You can't predict how things like this will turn out and how it will affect marketplaces and how it will create more competition.
Right.
Which is raises the level of all boats out there.
It does, because, I mean, if you're able to cut the expenses of a lot of these small to medium-sized businesses using Amazon, or helping them to market more effectively, or breaking up Amazon and some of these other big tech giants, that's going to have a huge effect on small and value companies. But again, we don't predict the future at all.
No.
These are classic cases of things that you couldn't have seen a few days ago.
Right. And I think that's the educational part of the show is don't try to predict this thing, but do be aware that these things come out of the blue.
Right.
And recognize that you're not going to be the one that predicts what's going to happen, how long it's going to take, what the effect is, and therefore trying to pick which stocks to buy, which ones to get rid of, what areas of the market to buy into. Tactical asset allocation is a huge waste of time, which is most of what the investment industry engages in, is the point I like to make. I have workshops where we go through, I don't care, name a financial company, any financial company, except for ours. and you will be naming a company that if you go to their website, has on their website all of this talk about the active management that they engage in. And you don't recognize that they're doing it because they don't tell you that they market time or they stock pick, but they say it in different ways. We look for underpricings, or we look for overpricings, or we look for opportunities, or they may say active management many times.
Tactical asset allocation.
Yeah, tactical asset allocation sounds great. I mean, I've heard asset allocation is great. Tactical asset allocation, it's a totally different animal. So I think it's important to understand that.
Right.
So that is, I think that's going to be interesting to watch, and we'll certainly keep an eye on that. But the point being that if you look at some of these, and this is where complacency can be a real problem. The average investor, if we look at, and we've done this before, where we take big mutual fund companies and we look at how much money is in big growth stocks compared to the rest of the market, and you will see that large growth stocks dominate portfolios. That means they dominate most likely your portfolio, and that is where it comes out of the blue. This is the same thing, and I feel like I have to repeat myself because we look back at the late 90s. Literally, I was working on opening this company in the late 90s, just before the tech bubble burst. My first full year of operation was the year 2000, and in March of 2000, that's when the stuff hit the fan. And most investors were just caught with, they were the king out in the water with no underwear on, right? And when the tide went out, it was not pretty.
70% drop.
Oh, yeah. It was 80% actually for the NASA. Yeah, exactly. So you look at that and go, wow, that's a huge drop. And most people were completely unprepared for it because they were complacent because it had been so good for so long for those companies.
And keep in mind, this isn't just Amazon. This is the FTC is targeting the monopolistic practices of other large tech companies as well, which those are the ones that have done
the
great
Microsofts, the
recently.
Apples, and,
right.
Sure.
Right. So I think it could have a lot of ramifications beyond just Amazon.
And it will be interesting. I'm going to be fascinated as to where this all ends up going. And I hope it does go somewhere because I'm a big advocate of competition because competition makes everybody stronger and makes everybody better. And in the end, the consumer wins when there's competition.
Right.